Good morning and happy Sunday. Happy Sunday to everyone. Prayerfully, everyone is enjoying their day. For those of you listening from abroad, happy Monday. I am so blessed to have again with us the Honorable Judge Joe Brown, and we are going to be discussing the Nolan Wells case. There is a link there if anyone has any questions or comments they would like to offer. So, without further delay, let us welcome the Honorable Judge Joe Brown. And some of you may say, well, why do you say that? That's how I met him, and that is always how I greet him. So, welcome, sir. How are you this morning?
Okay, and it's, by the way, a lifetime title, courtesy of the state of Tennessee. So, yeah, there you go. Now,
Okay. All right. We are going to be discussing let me have my notes together, the Nolan Wells case. And let me see. I see you there. Um, of course, this is a sad case. It's international attention now. Friends went out July 4th, and unfortunately, Nolan Wells did not return. So there's been a lot of speculation. There have been threats, some I would say perceived, some real, and that's what we'll get into later. But the first question I have is from your perspective, from your optics, and you've been doing this for a while, do you believe that this case and or answers will be or can be answered without leaving room for any doubt after all of the investigation and everything that entails an investigation, a thorough, transparent investigation is complete?
from my perspective, what I'm looking at is a very, very, very common tragedy that happens all of the time. And I'm sure it probably happened quite a few more times on this most recently past July 4th. What seems to be going on is, for a number of unholy reasons, some people are trying to make more of it than it appears to be. I've been a rescue diver. I'm a certified PADI rescue diver and certified master diver as well. I've pulled bodies out of the water. It happens all the time. And three friends, well, more than three friends who've known each other apparently since kindergarten, were on an outing, and it was the B thing: beach, babes, boys, bikinis, beer, booze, and booty, and a sinking boat. And it did not go well. And in the confusion, somebody turned up missing, and the facts that are out there right now that are undisputed just seem to indicate a tragedy. Now, there are other individuals who unfortunately have a lot to gain by making a lot out of this, because their hustle involves ramping up racial tension, so to speak. There are enough problems that the population of this republic has with each other, so it's quite easy to ramp the stress and the tension up, and certain individuals who are making the most of it have a lot to gain by making things more tense. But I would suggest that there be some patience exhibited in seeing the outcome of an exceptionally intense investigation that is way, way beyond what is usually merited by such circumstances. So, uh, it's hype at this point, and I haven't heard anything that would indicate anything past an accident.
Okay, so let me just let everyone know that even though you and I are friends, I would like to believe that we've had many, many discussions on and off the air. We agree with a lot of things, and there's some things that we don't agree with, which is fine. I don't believe everyone should agree with everyone. We would be robots if we did that. You mentioned about um, stirring the pot, so to speak, and making it more. My question is this, and there are some people that may feel this way, and others who may not feel this way. Given the history, I'll just say that. Given the history, do you believe that those who may be apprehensive or have feelings of mistrust or distrust in the system, are they, is
Well,
that, yes,
look, Mississippi has more elected and appointed black officials than any other state in the United States of America. I was just down there a week ago, and if you go down there, black folk practically run everything. So when you're talking about this mantra of what is essential white supremacy, you go down there and you look and you say, where is it? Because just about everywhere you look, there is a huge infusion of black folk, if not exclusively black folk. So um, the proposition that's being put, I think, is driven by a sense of emasculation that has been pushed and dysfunction that has been glorified over the last half century that I've been aware of and have been very disturbed by its impact and its appearance. So I would suggest that a lot of this goes away if you simply man up and say personal courage being what it is. There's not in this instance anything to worry about because there's one thing completely lacking in this big picture, and that's motive to commit a homicide. Uh, Perhaps negligence or recklessness that someone's attempting to evade. I can see that because of civil liabilities that would follow from such things. It's apparent from listening to the communications that there was a high likelihood that youthful males under such circumstances would be into beer and booze, so there is that problem. But I haven't heard anything that would indicate any motive that would not have arisen many, many times, or if at all, between kindergarten and past 12th grade. So these are friends. And it's not that friends might not get into mischance, but I don't see anything that would indicate that somebody had a motive to commit a murder. So I think Al Sharpton is a pimp. I think Ben Crump is an ambulance chaser. And they're running around talking about civil rights and such like is also mess because essentially every single right has been written, so to speak, in stone, manifested in case law and legislation 50 some years ago. And the only thing that's necessary right now is political actuation. What I do see is a trend for those who would be exercising such things on behalf of black people simply to pimp the black folk into voting for color and then delivering absolutely nothing, but at the same time taking opportunities to steal, misappropriate public funds, and generally deliver incompetent administration and government service. So we have some things that we have to deal with and hold the people that we elected who look like us accountable for their actions, which I frankly don't see too much these days. I see, for example, in Memphis, the mayor here uh, goes places with 6 uniformed police bodyguards. And at the same time, he may stumble onto me, who has more celebrity than he does, or let's say Doc Harrington or Attorney A.C. Wharton, who've been mayors, and they're likely to be someplace with no security at all. And this is the first time anybody has ever seen such things. And this particular person is scared of his constituents. And we hear black supremacy, uh, not black supremacy, white supremacy tooted in Memphis, Tennessee, but 75% of the police are black. The chief is black. The sheriff is black. 75% of the deputies are black. Just about every elected official in the area is black except one or two. The jury pool is 75% black. 60% of the criminal court judges are both black and female. And we hear white supremacy. And the question is, where is it other than maybe behind the scenes where money is being put into somebody's pocket to deliver incompetent government? I saw a black official, a female congresswoman, lamenting the horrible thing being done to Haitians by being sent back to hyper dangerous Haiti, where they risk death and all sorts of other things. And I took it upon myself to take a look at the largest Haitian cities, and not one of them is as dangerous statistically as Memphis, Tennessee, which, by the way, is the most dangerous city in the United States of America and probably has the most extensive black governance in the United States. And it is the 10th most dangerous place in the whole world. We've got a joint task force here called the Memphis Safe Task Force that has reduced violent crime 52 to 56%, depending upon who you're listening to, since October last year. But the black elected officials have filed a lawsuit to get it out of the place and resume, I guess, it being murder capital of the United States. Why, you might want to ask, would someone do that? Meanwhile, we have scandal after scandal where people are being exposed to be involved in all sorts of schemes and scams to misappropriate public funds that run upwards to $1.5 billion in the Memphis area. So you might want to think that, okay, we don't have the old time crew where they actually endured the overt manifestation of racism and bigotry and all sorts of dangerous things that could have happened. And we have a group that wants to act like they are assuming that mantle. And they have an interest in making things look more dangerous than they are when they're not. Believe me, I've been through some of that stuff from way back when, and the conditions right now are much, much better. So I'm looking at something that happens every single holiday, many times. And I also know from having been peripherally involved in this industry how often the case is that some kid in a newsroom is looking over the wire and he sees something and it looks like it'll ramp up the ratings, which improve commercial revenue. And he pushes it or she pushes it, and this 23-year-old has drafted it up, and the newscaster reads it as it scrolls across the lens, and it looks like he's doing it because he understands it when he doesn't or she doesn't, and they're just simply reading. And then you have the monetized social media phenomenon, and people are trying to ramp up attention so they can make money off of it. And meanwhile, gullible people are going around all horrified and they have no patience. So we haven't seen anything yet that would indicate foul play other than somebody's imagination that's being pumped out very vigorously. And we have the old time Nazi thing, which is tell a lie long enough and loud enough, and you can get anyone, including the liar, to believe it. And we have this narrative that's being pushed, 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 and other people are ramping up clientele. Other people are validating their so called leadership, which isn't, and it's bad. So I would suggest that before you get all worked up about it, you actually find out what's going on in Mississippi, which, despite its bad history, isn't the worst place to be in the United States if you're black these days. Now, the other thing is look at the educational situation. Mississippi is now ranked above Tennessee, which is right next door, and California education wise. So we have the phenomenon of black parents in Memphis, Tennessee trying to find a way to get their children established as residents in Mississippi so they can go to a Mississippi school. Uh, you have a situation that is very analogous in Mississippi to the National Basketball Association, the NBA. 1946, one of the most racist institutions in the United States was the NBA. There was an active process involved to keep black players out of the NBA. You got the Harlem Globetrotters, et cetera, that arose to showcase black talent, but there were no black players. 1946, the Lakers hired Don Barksdale out of UCLA. And now, when you look at a black player, you see nothing but black players just about on a playing court. And the NBA has become a black thing. Maybe not on the management side, but at least when it comes to the athletes who are participating. And just like the NBA has morphed from one of the most racist institutions in the United States to something that isn't, at least on the surface and what you can see, the same thing has happened in Mississippi. So, where you want to see a mess, go find out where all of the black people are dying. Memphis, Tennessee, Chicago, Illinois, Washington, D.C., Detroit, Michigan, places like that, and look who's running those places: Los Angeles, Chicago, Atlanta, Memphis, uh, you name it. And you get people who really don't know how to govern because they don't know economics, they don't know finance, they don't know community development. They don't know leadership. They lack charisma. They lack personal courage, and they encourage black men to be very sissified. And I'm very disappointed at that. You go to a restaurant, and the waiters walk up and they ask the woman what she wants to order for the table, not because it's ladies first, and then they walk up and give the tab to the woman because they're too used to a couple going in there and it's the woman that picks up the tab and controls the order rather than the guy. And you see little small things like that. You see black places and you see a lack of businesses, a lack of small business. You see established restaurants and clubs disappearing. And in Memphis, we don't even have black clubs anymore in a predominantly black city. So where the black folk go to hang out is, oh, the Happy Mexican. The service is great, food's good, but we don't have anything to do with the ownership and management of the place. And the parking lots are packed, and we have no place to go that is identifiably black run. So, I mean, it's a failure. So, we need to do better. And this is just one of those things where there is a distraction thrown out from this incompetence, ineptitude, and lack of character. My view. I'm through. Pass the mic. You there? Hello? You there? Can you hear me? Hmm.
Hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you now.
Okay, perfect. So what I was saying is, or the question that I had is,
By the way, did you hear what I said? Or was that?
absolutely. No, no, I
Oh,
heard
okay.
you. Absolutely. And while I agree with that in part, I have a question. There's there is corruption, in my opinion, and from my observations, all over in all populations, to include my hometown, DMV, which encompasses Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. Washington being one of the, well, I'm not going to say one of the largest, but then again, it could be. There was a case some years ago. You may remember it. You may not. You have ties with California, so you may
Yeah,
remember
but
this.
I was born in Washington, D.C., FYI, so Freedman's
Okay,
Hospital. So, yeah, and I've lived there before, done research when I was with an intern with a D.C. think tank years ago. But, I have a
okay,
connection with D.C., and I've
okay.
been back quite a few times recently. And I
Oh,
think what's happening there is an absolute disgrace. uh, Gentrification has shooed all of the American style black folk out, and you have everybody from the Caribbean and Africa that looks like one of us, but you don't see too many native born American black folk there.
there's actually a lot going on in DC, but we'll discuss that later. But as far as people feeling as though, and I have to say honestly that I can't blame those who may feel that there could be possibly a cover up or mishandling, because there was a case some years ago. I forgot the year. I did something on it not too long ago in reference to a congressman from California, Gary Condit. I don't know if you remember that name, but he was in a sordid affair with intern Chandra Levy. He denied that at first, and then, after an investigation was done, after her disappearance of over a year, her remains were found in Rock Creek Parkway. A year later, again, he was exonerated of any wrongdoing, and the person that was arrested and convicted was from Guatemala. The person who snitched on him actually was found out later that he didn't tell the truth, and who was convicted was released and deported back to, it was either Guatemala or El Salvador, one of those countries. But the point is, there was no justice for Chandra Levy. Chandra Levy was a young white woman. Gary Condon lied and said there was no type of relationship where there was. So my question is it wrong? And should the people who have questions whether or not there could be, and I'm not saying or implying that there is, but for those who feel strongly that there could be a cover up because of cases from the past or from, as we spoke about earlier, history, are they right in feeling that way? And it's not just maybe someone stirring up a pot, but real cases to make people feel the way that they do. And I'll
Okay,
pass
look,
it back to you.
look,
Yes.
look. As a defense lawyer, I tried a whole bunch of homicide cases. They're fairly common. Let me ask you a question. What'd you have for dinner yesterday? Was
I
it
had,
vegan?
what did I have for dinner
Was it
yesterday?
all vegan?
No, it
Okay, then
absolutely
something
wasn't.
had to die for you to eat it.
Yes,
So we kill better than any other thing on this planet. It's in our nature. It's required if we are to get a healthy diet and include necessary protein in that diet. Now, that means we are killers. So we have control mechanisms that are in place that have arisen over several 100,000 years so we don't too aptly kill each other and just kill what's necessary. But every now and then, those mechanisms run out of room or they go astray and we kill each other. Homicide is a very frequent crime. I know I tried 42 first degree murder cases where death penalty was demanded. None of my clients are on death row. I did get the youngest person in the whole world on death row at the time. I got his death sentence set aside unanimously by an all white, all male Arkansas Supreme Court. It's been 40 some years ago. I tried, I don't, or presided rather, over I don't know how many homicide capital cases when I got elected to two 8-year terms here as a criminal court judge in Memphis, Tennessee, in what is essentially the homicide capital of the United States. So murder is common. I also, as I said, am a certified master diver, and I've done several thousand dives in the ocean. And I would say water is quite hazardous when it comes to being in it because we don't breathe water and we drown and we drink and we're youthful and we act crazy. And when there are bare bodies in bikinis on beaches and beer and booze and boats, all kinds of things happen. And every time we have a 4th of July, every time we have a Memorial Day, or Labor Day. We have lots of people who die on those days in the water. Now, this is one instance where it has been ramped up. Now, as to whether or not you need to worry about it, I tell you what you do. Take one or take, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 friends and divide by 350 million, 360 million, and see how many zeros you get after the decimal point before you get to a number. And that is the percentage point, which is minuscule, effectively non existent in terms of your chances of this happening to you. So when people start ramping it up, think of what they're gaining money from commercial revenue on a ratings ramped news service that's 24/7, where Nielsen rates it, monetize social media, hack politician, ambulance chasing lawyers. You get all kinds of motives for why you get this pushed. People who have a narrative, people who are cowards, who don't have the balls to stand for something or stand up against something. And they want to make it all right to run where you act in fear and you show cowardly fear because you aren't brave enough to face adversity and you like a good boogeyman story. So I think the whole thing's kind of embarrassing, and what needs to happen is everybody needs to man up or woman up and just wait whether or not there's any report. And the idea of the Black Caucus with their just abysmal incompetence and lack of attention to the needs of the people that elect them because they look like the constituency that they do not represent. Uh, I think it is absolutely disgusting. I go back 5 years to a 2 week long debacle, a circus, where the Black Caucus was having hearings on reparations relative to whether there should be a study of reparations. It was a real clown show. And then every member of the Black Caucus, 2 weeks after this circus, co sponsored the introduction of the, guess what, gay reparations bill, which passed without debate on the first voice vote. And not one of them has done anything about introducing nor sponsoring nor supporting nor developing one shred of legislation to deal with black reparations, assuming that the political point has not evaporated where that is a prospect, or assuming there's merit to the position. Now, I look at this and I say, wow, what are you doing? I look at what's happening in Minnesota, where there is a very high percentage of black representation in the state houses or the state house and senate. And I look at the corruption that's going on there. I look at the prototype for that corruption being in Memphis, Tennessee, and in Mississippi, by the way, some 2.5 decades ago. And I look at Los Angeles with what's going on out there, and wow, guess who's heading Los Angeles? But if you go out to LA, you don't see any benefits accruing to anybody, any place out there, except a lot of noise. And it's just embarrassing to sit back and look at this and say, what happened? Was it black exploitation back in the early 1970s, late 1960s, when that became the part of the entertainment? Is it rap where they glorify pimping and drug dealing and stealing and murdering and all kinds of stuff that used to be on the bottom of everybody's list and the top of we need to clean this up list? The association of, we can't have a crackdown on crime because that's racist because black folk are criminals. Where did that come from? You have pulpit pimps who fleece their congregation for money they can't afford to give up because they've sinned so badly that they know they're going to hell, and they think this pimp preacher can buy them out of that destination and divert them to heaven by putting 25% tithes in somebody's collection plates. We've got things to do. And this is bad. And I look at it this way. I hate to say it, but why is Nolan's life more important than the lives of the thousands of black kids, black adults who die in our cities on a regular basis? Why is that? Nobody gets upset about that, but because some hustlers made a big deal of it, you spend all of this time and resource on one person. You get the Black Caucus talking about sending in the FBI for one person, but they are hollering about taking these task forces out of these very dangerous cities where millions of black people have their lives on the line because of black on black lawlessness. And nobody wants to have the FBI in, but the same Black Caucus is saying, take the federal agents out of these areas. I wonder at the lack of consistency.
And
So
I understand that. So if I may take the baton for a moment, that
have it,
question,
run with it.
I can't run it that well anymore. My knees are bothering me this morning, getting up there. But people have asked that question. And my answer to that is because, again, history and lack of transparency, maybe the time that it's taken. Again, I don't know Mississippi. I don't know all the
Hold
intricate
on, can I say
details.
something? The
Sure.
time element is if you rush an indictment, you're just throwing spaghetti on the wall and hoping a strand sticks up there. A good defense lawyer will tear up anything that you just rush together. So it takes time. So right now, the lapse in time from the event to a very intense investigation being completed is not excessive in terms of the way this game has been played for a very long time. You even had people, why did they take his throat out? Why did they put it? You don't do remove body parts from during an autopsy and stuff them back in the corpse so you can bury it. And why they remove the trachea, by the way, is when you have a very, very intense and detailed autopsy, you want to investigate whether there was the ingestion of any kind of toxic substance like poison. So they did that. They haven't found anything. Everything is consistent with a drowning. And we need to await the outcome. And likely as not, nothing's going to come of it. And if a prosecutor were to yield to the political pressure and just throw an indictment at somebody without probable cause or enough evidence to have a reasonable chance of having a fair jury deliver a righteous conviction, then you don't need a prosecution. And you see, the other thing is that all of these people hollering about it need to understand that everything in American law is a two-edged sword. It goes both ways. And you want it because you think something's done wrong. Well, guess what? 10 years from now, 3 years from now, the other side, if there is another side, can use it to come back at somebody that looks like you for a slight cause. So when you're talking about justice, remember it's blind. It has mufflers over its ears, so it can't hear the voice patterns, and it is attempting to be neutral, detached, and impartial. So keep justice that way rather than yielding to the whims of the mob. Remember, we got a problem with mobs because there were these things called lynchings that some black people got swept up in. And when you talk about lynching, don't just focus on black folk. Remember, there's this old movie trope from the 40s and early 50s where the sheriff in a western town is standing out there with his shotgun saying, boys, ain't nobody gonna take nobody out of my jail and hang them while I'm the sheriff. We gonna have a fair trial before we hang him. So, this is a proclivity of America to go deal with mob justice. So we don't want mob justice. So let's not push it.
Absolutely. So may I take the baton for a moment?
Go right ahead. You have it back.
Thank you, sir.
I snatched it. That was probably rude. I'm sorry.
And I'll snatch it back.
You got it.
So, okay. So you mentioned, again, and there are some people that agree with that statement and others may not. I believe the reason why at least I have concerns is because it was a young man. And again, I'm just looking at the optics, and you mentioned, and you have reason to mention, um, he is not, was not the only person that lost their life. And you mentioned about people trying to pump the situation. Well, if I turn this to you and ask you as it relates to monetization, there are a lot of people, in my opinion, who may be from a looking at it from a different perspective, who has absolutely monetized it in several ways, clipping up interviews and showing them at intervals, advertising a liquor brand and having attorneys advertising liquor brands, all while praising someone who was unalived and did not agree with certain things. So I wanted to put that out there. And when you speak about or ask the question, why are so many people concerned or thinking about this incident when there are so many people that pass away? Well, this woman that I'm about to mention did not pass away, but for at least a month or two, the internet had gone crazy with 84-year-old or 85-year-old Nancy Guthrie. Is that the same? Or is that the different? Because how many people were kidnapped that day or children went missing that day? Why was the focus all on, and no disrespect, Nancy Guthrie? And I'll yield back.
Okay, that's the same question. Why was it? And you might want to ask yourself a question: why does every single major police department have a homicide squad or a homicide bureau or a homicide detective component? Because homicide is a very common crime. People kill each other. We are killers. We eat meat. Something's got to die. So we know how to kill it so it dies so we can put it on a plate and everybody go, how tasty and tender. I mean, really, the thing is that what about all of the thousands of people that get murdered every year? Why no attention paid to them? And what is it about this very common thing that happens? Not saying that there are not racially motivated killings that occur all of the time. But when you have 340, 360 million people who are legally in a country, probably closer to 400 million if you include all of the folks that snuck in and broke the law to do it, then you're going to have a lot of killings. And which ones hit the press are going to depend upon chance, circumstance, or utility in generating ratings or money or monetization or political benefit or a hustle where you can settle something. So, what are you looking at? Reality? If you want to deal with reality, spend this time dealing with the fundamental aspects of character that are evaporating very quickly from this society that lead to homicides. So somebody come up with a motive. This is not one black kid stuck someplace where a bunch of unruly young whites who don't know him murder him. That's according to the allegations. This is supposed to be a homicide committed by some people who've been around him since they've been 5 years old. So a lot of people are in ignorance, and there are a lot of incidents that go back a long way where you got 86, 87-year-old folk, one's white, one's black. One of them's a very powerful white guy, and this black guy is his number one buddy. They go everywhere, and they have been since they've been 10 years old. I mean, that happens. So, what about
Understood.
all of the black folk who are one in a platoon full of Navy SEALs? Are they supposed to say, I refuse to go on the mission because these three other, five other white guys are armed to the teeth, and several of them come from Mississippi and Alabama. So I'm mutinying and refusing an order because they might kill me. What about all of the folk on a football team, basketball, baseball team, track squad who are surrounded by white teammates and they go on a bus someplace? Are they supposed to say, I want to stay at home because, you know, they might kill me? What about the black ball players on Ole Miss's football team down in Oxford, Mississippi, which is a worse area than where this is supposed to be historically? Okay, are they supposed to say I'm not going up in that dormitory because there are too many white folk and they might kill me for no reason at all? I mean, come on, be real. And then what about your manliness where you make it too much of a cost to take you out because you have consequences to deliver that you can't because you don't know how to fight any better than those little pussies who are on the TikTok fight club stuff, and they fight like little 7-year-old girls where they're widely swinging away, don't know how to block, don't know how to punch, nothing. So, yeah, is that what we're looking at? Is that a confession that manhood has disappeared in the hood, where all you can do is kill because you're too big a punk to punch it out toe to toe because you don't want your face scratched because you depend on your ladies liking you being pretty so they will take care of you? I mean, come on. It's
Well,
disgraceful. I mean,
I
it may be homicide, but one on one, you get the whole United States government a vote on one situation when there are thousands more that everybody ignores that are a lot worse. Look at the rap situation. They're putting a thing on where somebody ran off at his mouth because he was trying to build up street cred. Now he's on trial out there in Nevada for supposedly killing Tupac. And then you got to take it out of the context of what was being spread back then. It was a East Coast, West Coast thing between one side and the other of the rap industry, and Tupac perished on one side and Biggie Smalls on the other. Or are you talking about something that's just another cover up, which I suspect, which is it's all about money laundering? And the rap industry is an ideal source to launder money because there's a huge cash flow, and the people involved aren't certified public accountants, but the people who have their money being laundered expect somebody to act that way. So when pennies disappear, somebody dies, but it's nice to throw it off as a rap thing. Boom, this is rap conflict. Yeah, money laundering. Do you even know what that is and how it works? Or are you naive and you spend too much time watching that new game that just started, that's run by the NBA, and you forget about the fact that it was absolutely racist and segregated within the lifetime of some people who still watch it? But now look at it. So when you start talking about that kind of context and putting it on Mississippi, be careful because you throw away a lot of knowledge and discernment, and you ought to be more aware. Stop being scared. Stand up, man up, and do what you have to do to be dangerous to mess with. And don't go out talking about you're going to kill somebody just because, and that's something you don't want out there because, using that word again, the other side can do it if there is another side.
understood. So I would like to pivot to this question.
All right.
Do you do you believe, and thank you for that. I appreciate it. Do you believe or do you think that there's a possibility that this case, Nolan Wells, at any time, meaning at the very beginning, was mishandled, or perhaps the proper procedures were not followed.
Actually, there are more procedures followed in this than 99.99 etc. percent of the cases. This was one that has been scrutinized top to bottom, and it's offensive that one death in a system carries more attention than has been devoted to all of the rest of the homicides that may occur within a given jurisdiction during the last 10 years. That's disgusting. This one case has had probably more effort than the last several hundred cases have had collectively put into them. And I'm not saying that bad things don't happen, but you don't need to go work yourself up into a frenzy over a possibility. Let's see if something goes on. And American law requires probable cause to initiate something, which I don't see right now. Maybe somebody can develop it. And then if it proceeds past an initial accusation, then you have to establish beyond a reasonable doubt, which is a whole different order of business. So, where is your evidence? Is there anything beyond circumstantial? And then the thing about circumstantial evidence is, though it can establish a case, it has to exclude every other possibility but the one of guilt in order to stick. So, right now, we've got, hey man, we got to go because the boat's sinking. And then the engine stalls on the boat, so the self-bailing apparatus doesn't work when the boat's not moving, and the boat's sinking. Water's coming in over the transom. We're in 30 feet of water, which is the depth of most harbors surrounding and around and about the United States. And you can certainly drown in 30 feet of water real good. And there's an expensive boat that belongs to Granddad, so we need to get it back, and we called the waterborne equivalent of AAA to come get this thing and tow us. And meanwhile, the young man is on the shore with the bear babes and bikinis and beer, and it's a holiday. So he'll get back later, or he might see it out there stalled 100 yards or so offshore in 30 feet of water just past the surf line, which is probably very mild considering the location, decides to swim out, gets a cramp, doesn't make it, body gets pulled out of the water some hours later. All right, happens all the time. Had a neighbor of mine, Robert Wagoner, lived right across the street, and his famous wife, Natalie something or another, she drowned by supposedly falling off of a boat, on Catalina Island, at Catalina Island. Uh, Natalie Woods, famous actress. So they opened that back up in 2011 because people all said something had to be foul play. We want answers, but they got nothing out of it because there was nothing there to get. So, people's emotions need to be held in check. And when you deal with law and evoking the legal process, it needs to be very firmly based rather than on somebody's feelings.
I
I
just
say that because I dealt with it for so many years. And it's horrible when there's a miscarriage of it.
absolutely, and I think that is why, and I'm not speaking for everyone, I want that to be clear, why so many people feel the way that they do. So the next question I have is, I know what this is, but other people may not. What is the chain of custody when it comes to evidence?
In other words, at trial, before any evidence is admitted, you have to establish the chain of custody. What does that mean? Okay, let's take a dope case. The defendant is supposed to be in possession of cocaine. All right. How do you know it's cocaine? It was tested. All right. How do you know what you tested was what was taken from the defendant? Well, you have a chain of custody. Who took it from the defendant, when, and where? What did that individual do with what was taken from the defendant? Who did he turn it over to? When he turned it over to somebody, what did that person do with it? Where was it stored? How was it secured? Was it taken to be tested? Who took it to be tested? So you have to be able to get somebody up who can raise the right hand and swear or affirm that I seized it from the person. I checked it into the property room or the evidence room. I secured it in the evidence room. I took it from the evidence room to the lab. This is who I turned it over to. I received it in the lab. I did the test. This is what I did with the test results. And this is whom the results went back to. And you have to trace it from the point it was seized to the point it comes into the courtroom. Otherwise, it doesn't get in. And then the other problem is right now there's nothing that's really admissible that would come into evidence because it lacks foundation, which is that kind of thing. How does it get to this point? What is the significance? Okay, somebody's dead, but what changes it from being an accident, maybe negligence, maybe recklessness, which is another thing, to where it is a palpable crime where somebody did it intentionally? Now, that is where this particular case lacks anything right now. And there may be something somebody knows who's properly keeping their mouth shut. And it's not the business of the public to know every detail, because if it is in fact something that is real, then you don't want people to be clued so they can go destroy evidence, conceal evidence, bribe witnesses, or intimidate witnesses. And the other thing, I'll mention this since it comes up so often, why are they getting lawyers? Well, guess what? Most people in America that aren't flat broke busted frequently lawyer up whenever anybody starts talking questionably to them. It is the smart thing to do. That's why you have the right to be represented by an attorney at all stages of these proceedings, including the preliminary ones, or when there is a matter that may need some legal advice, you have a lawyer on retainer so you can call the guy up and say, hey, look, there's just something I was thinking about, what's going on. Okay? So there's nothing wrong with that. That's just being an American and not broke and not coming from a culture where nobody gets it.
Okay, pivoting from that, and I'm glad that you mentioned that because that was going to be a question. You mentioned about talking, or someone may be rightfully not speaking about anything right now because just because of the optics and it being the smart thing to do.
No. Fifth Amendment, not optics. You have a right to remain silent. I used to, when I practice law, I tell my clients, shut your mouth. Do not open your mouth. Keep it closed. And these boys are telling a convincing story, but if I were their family lawyer, I'd say, shut up.
And I'm glad you said that. So I don't know, you probably have, but Brandon Tatum, who calls himself the Officer Tatum, previous law enforcement officer out of Tucson, he's had a couple or several interviews with these young men. Do you believe, in your opinion, because a lot of people, they have their feelings about this, but I would like to get your perspective. Do you believe that, and people are free to speak to whomever they want to, should they have been speaking to Brandon Tatum so soon or at all?
They didn't do themselves any harm, but it's very dangerous. You can see the extreme. Look at Fannie Willis. She's the attorney general elected to represent one of the largest cities in America. That's Atlanta, which what Fulton County means. And she shot her big mouth off, and although she ought to know what the Fifth Amendment is about, she acted like she didn't. So now she's implicated herself and many other people in some criminal acts. So those are being investigated, and had she kept her mouth shut, none of this would have come to light. So she's also exposed herself to some intense criminal liability, if only for making a knowingly false statement to a federal agent or agency, in this case, IRS. So, you know,
Absolutely, which
you
brings me
can
back
see
to the
all
question.
kinds of things. You see it on television, you see it in the movies, you read it in books and novels. You see it on the news. You have a right to remain silent. Anything you say can and may be used in evidence against you. You have a right to be represented by an attorney. If you cannot afford one, one will be appointed to represent you. If you do not wish to continue with this interrogation and wish to consult with counsel, you have a right to do that, and we will stop asking you questions so you'll have that opportunity. Blah, blah, blah. And you see it over and over and over again. For some reason, big dummies don't get it. Not saying that these kids are dumb. The story is just basic. Hey, we've been hanging around with this guy since we've been 5 years old. Why would we kill him? And if we're racist at the worst, we're one of those who likes to have pet Negroes around, and he's our pet Negro. So why would we kill our pet Negro any more than we'd kill our pet dog? You can even get real crude about it. So far, nobody's offered a motive. Well, he was Will White. Well, you don't think this is the first time they've seen Homeboy out talking to a woman, black, white, brown, red, yellow. So that doesn't work.
So my question to you is this then, and I'm glad that you stated that you thought that that was probably a disservice to them. With your extensive experience on the bench, outside of the bench, if, I'm just saying if, hypothetically, they came to you because of your presence, would you have spoken to them or would you have declined that?
Spoken to. Well, I'm
Mhm.
not practicing law right now. I'm too old and I don't have an
Mhm.
office and I don't feel like
Neither
malpractice insurance or hiring a secretary and all the office paraphernalia you need now. So I'm
right,
not
but
going to give
neither,
anybody legal advice. I might speak as Professor Brown about the law and its nuances, but that's what I'm doing. I'm not giving anybody legal advice. I'm
well,
talking
I'm
about
speaking
what the
about
law
the
is about and how it
conversation.
works from long experience.
Right, but I'm speaking,
56 years worth kind of gets you that position, but it is what it is. And I'm listening to people talk about the law who at best are amateurs. There is this last time you went to a doctor, when you went in and you saw he or she, was it your assumption that they had been an intern in somebody's hospital and then a resident so that they got hands on practice carrying out what they'd read in the books? That would be the association that you had in your mind, wouldn't it? Asking you a question, yes or no, or you can explain. Wouldn't you presume that your physician has had experience as an intern and then as a resident?
I would.
Okay. Now, supposing you got a referral to this doctor and you found out they'd never been an intern or had never been a resident, how would you feel? You wouldn't feel confident, would you?
No, and that's actually happened. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. We have a comment here. The link is there if you wanted to ask the question, but it's in the comment section. So I'll read it to you. The question or the comment is, when the law is not in balance, we keep asking questions. And thank you, Drop of the C. Drop of the C follows up with, the law isn't always justice. Truth still matters.
No, that's not what it's about. See, if you get indicted, it says the people of the state of wherever you happen to be versus John Doe. And there are several million people in that state versus one guy. So that guy has rights under the Bill of Rights and under the 14th Amendment as they were extended to the states. Now, that means that there are limitations on what can be done to prosecute you. There are perfect crimes. There's supposed to be, because if you transcended the perfect crime, what happens is you give the government too much power and the government becomes too dangerous because it becomes prone to being a totalitarian government, like under Joe Stalin or Adolf Hitler or Mussolini or Chairman Mao Zedong or something like that. So you don't want that kind of thing because that's too dangerous. That puts people in gulags, concentration camps, lined up on a wall and shot for not following the political line. Now, that said, there is a sense in American law that it is better for 100 guilty men to go free than one innocent man getting convicted. And that's because the citizens have the right to self help, self defense, and means of securing that. So you don't want to give government too much power. Now, the same people that are hollering about the government overextends itself for some peculiar reason want the government to have excessive power when it comes to prosecution. Now, it still comes back to this thing about who's telling you about the law. I'm looking at somebody who's talking to me on one side, and I'm looking to a guy who said, okay, this guy's tried quite a few criminal jury trials in front of me years ago. It was pretty good. And that's 26 years ago. So, wow, I'm sure he's improved because he was real good then. He had the law in his mind. He didn't have to even look at his notes. He could recite the cases, the principle, and he was great arguing to the jury, and he knew the nuances way back then to instructions before the jury. All right. He was running for a vacant criminal court judgeship. The person that won is 4.5 years literally out of law school, just barely 30 years of age in life, has had absolutely no trials of any sort in front of a jury, hasn't even filed an appeal or anything, um, has never seen jury instructions or heard them, and everything that person would know would be out of the book. Now, that is a problem. A lot of people on the national level that have reputations because of media exposure, they haven't had any trials or they've had very few trials and they're not experts. They're like an intern who's had 5 nights in an emergency room, and that's the extent of his hands on experience. We have too many lawyers these days who have slick advertising campaigns who don't know the back side or the front side from a jury box, never had any exposure. We have judges who are sitting on the bench presiding over a certain type of case who've never had a case where they've been to court on that kind of matter. We have judges on the bench who've never had a trial as a lawyer, never had an appeal, but they're presiding over major cases. We have, I'll give you an example, and this is why the law goes wrong. We had one somebody that put a spouse through law school who decided to go to law school, graduated from law school, took the bar, passed the bar. 4 days after they were sworn in, to the bar. They were appointed judge of unlimited jurisdiction with jury trials, homicide jurisdiction, unlimited money jurisdiction. And within 18 months of getting out of law school, they were on the federal bench as a federal trial judge. And you wonder why some of the things that are crazy that are done by judges get done. Well, let's have this. Here's somebody 18 months out of law school on the federal bench, never had a case, never had a client, never had a trial, never had a hearing, and they're over everything and making, decisions on evidence, admissibility, those things about chain of custody, jury instructions. Here they are, they're supposed to be giving these things in the heaviest cases imaginable, and they've never had such case. So that's one of the problems with the legal profession. You have these opinions being put out there that are authoritatively taken by people who are essentially just out of med school and have never done internship in an emergency room, let alone a residency in a hospital. So they don't know anything about their trade. But
Good. So may I take the baton or snatch the baton for a
you
quick
have it.
minute? Okay, we have a comment. And the comment again, thank you, drop of the sea, says when silence protects the system instead of the truth, the system is out of balance. Now, you mentioned about experience in the courtroom, and you asked me questions about when you go to the doctor. Now, let's just say, and I'm not implying
Can I
anything.
just make one comment? Some things aren't your damn business until they develop. You aren't supposed to know. That's why they have stuff called confidentiality. You don't want any slight attention that the system may pay to you broadcast to everybody you know. I mean, that's bad for your reputation.
Absolutely. And that should go to a lot of people that are quote unquote leaking things that they claim that they hear. But when you mentioned about experience, there are some that are in the position of examining the deceased who may not, in some eyes, be as qualified as others because the bar for particular states, I'll just put it that way, may not be as high than they are in other states. Does that mean that they're not qualified, or perhaps they may overlook or miss something? Is that a possibility? And I'll
Yes,
yield.
it is, certainly. Look at the state of Washington. They no longer require a law exam because certain people may be discriminated against, is considering the stupid, ignorant, and just clueless attorneys I've encountered over the last several decades. I'm amazed that somebody would do that to let more in to perpetrate fraud on the public. So, if anything, they need to make the admission to the bar a bit more strenuous and weed out some of the ones that are there who don't know what the hell they're up to.
I'm sorry, you said this is in Washington,
The
Seattle?
state of Washington, not the
Oh,
Washington, D.C.
and when was this effective?
This was last year. So they no longer have to take a bar exam. There are some states right now where if you pass, you graduate from certain law schools, you don't have to take the bar. So there's no testing. Or in some places, like in Tennessee, you didn't have to pass certain parts of the bar exam. But interestingly enough, every single case I've had in the last 50 years in Tennessee or been involved with or consulted with uh, involved a part of the bar you didn't have to pass. And I've never been involved in a case that was on the part of the bar that was mandatory when you came to pass. That just had to do with the lucrative nature of that particular type of practice. There are things with, and I tell people who are newly to take the bar, I said, when you list where you intend to practice, put one of these outlying counties. You'll have a much greater chance of being admitted than if you list one of the more dense counties where there are a lot of practitioners. Things like that happen, and they're reality.
Well, in my opinion, if I may interject, that being said, as it relates to the law, and then back to those who are given the responsibility, those who are entrusted in examining the deceased, could that open
Yes,
down?
I said, yeah, yeah.
Yes,
Medical examiners are not all of the same competence, and I just
yes. So I was
mentioned an
thinking,
aspect that I do have expertise in. Now, in
yes.
terms of incompetent medical examiners, oh, I've encountered a few, believe me.
So does that
And I know
open
what kind of
person?
horrors that can put in the whole system.
Right, and that was
So,
my question. Would that put the onus, or could that allow that person to be opened up, or perhaps the state, if it gets that far, open up to liability? And I'll yield
well,
back.
see, look, no, it's not. There's a thing called sovereign immunity. That means that the sovereign or the government has to okay being sued. So it does not get crippled by people who just file actions against it for the purpose of crippling it. That's what's known as lawfare when it deals with ordinary people, and that's what's become popular. The Bill of Rights was supposed to prevent that, but some people say, let's just, anytime we feel upset, we need to go charge somebody. But everything does not result in prosecution. I'll give you what? Have you been to a Super Bowl party in the last 10 years?
I have not been to a Super Bowl party, but I went to the Super Bowl parade
No,
when,
no, no. I'm making a point.
go ahead.
How many friends do you know went to a Super Bowl party where they put a bet on who was going to win the game or what the score was going to be at the end of the first, second, third quarter, anything like that? You know anybody that's bet on a sporting event?
Absolutely.
You know anybody that's had a poker game where there's money on the table?
I've heard of it. Absolutely.
That's illegal in damn near every state, including Nevada, unless you're in a licensed casino. So how do you think people do that and become so common in experience in American life? Everybody's putting penny ante poker, crap
Yes.
games. That's illegal. But you see, we have rules against government intrusion, so you just can't say, I know it's a Super Bowl, so Officer Tompkins and Officer Allen, who are rookies, want to make a big name. So they're going to bust in all of these houses on this street because they see all of these cars and they say somebody's probably got a bet on the table with what's happening with the Super Bowl.
And if I may interject for a moment, holidays to include the 4th of July, many people indulge in the consumption of alcoholic beverages. And the state of Mississippi is not underage drinking illegal
Yeah,
or
but we
prevented.
did it. We used to drink beer every morning for breakfast in the dorms of where we stayed when I went to UCLA way back when. Of course, you can always get beer. You can walk in a place and look like you're 35 years old and be 19. You can get beer. We always could get beer. And
But if
anything else you did, or it's a party. People brought beer to parties because they were 23 years old and there are three coolers worth of cold beer there. And there's somebody nobody is saying anything about who's 18 years old getting a beer.
understood, but now as it relates to this case, there are people that have mentioned if this could be an issue down the line.
Yes, it probably is. But the thing of it, The thing of it is this: it's a misdemeanor, and under American law, you can't arrest anybody for a misdemeanor unless it's committed in an officer's presence. So, did any cop stand there and watch the consumption of the beer? I mean, if there's anything afterwards, yeah, they can go get something done about it. I mean, operating a boat is still part of the whole process of operating a motor vehicle while under the influence of an intoxicant and or drug, and it's a crime. It's a misdemeanor for the most part, and that includes Mississippi. So a lot of this may be generated by some youth who've been drinking beer or doing some other form of booze, not wanting to get caught. I mean, but that's a different issue than if there is a palpable intentional homicide or one that is attributable to the intoxication that could be proved. You just can't say they were probably drunk. Prove it.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you said that people must prove, which brings me to my last question that I have for you. I know that what this means, but I want you to describe it from the legal point and say it out loud. Thank you for your comment, but please be respectful. Defamation. There has been a lot of talk about defamation and threats. What is defamation by law? Not by what people think, but by law, and threats as it relates to an actual threat versus a perceived threat.
Okay, defamation is making somebody look bad, where people look down on you or it destroys your reputation or damages it. Why is that important? You ever see these scenes in the old movies or read about them where somebody takes the gauntlet, slaps somebody across the face or the glove, and says, I challenge you to a duel, and our seconds will pick your second, and you agree to have a fight with swords at dawn outside a certain park, or gunfight behind the Long Branch Saloon at high noon, or pistols at 10 paces. You don't want that. And you see that disturbs public peace, dignity, and order. So you do stuff that discourages the breaking of the public peace. And that's what a civil case is about. The civil damages are essentially an acknowledged bribe to the offended party so they don't take matters in their own hands. I had the interesting experience of talking to a direct descendant of one of the participants in that famous feud between the Hatfields and McCoys. It's been within the last 30 days. It was fascinating listening to the family's story. Now, you don't want feuds, you don't want vendettas, you don't want people taking things into their own hands and risking other folk dying from a stray bullet going in the wrong direction. So you say, if you don't go slice this guy up, shoot this guy up, challenge him to a duel because you were insulted, then we'll give you damages. So, in other words, defamation of character is something that's generally embarrassing, and it talks about matters of character. It can either be in writing or it can be by word. So, one is libel and one is slander. You say it, it's slander. If you write it, it's libel. So we try to discourage people doing things that would cause a public disturbance. You have the right under the First Amendment to say it, but there might be consequences to saying it. Now, that's the essence of the whole thing. You don't want people going around creating incidents. Now, as to what you say, you have a right to freedom of speech. And one of the more interesting cases was written by a Justice Brown, no relation, but I did know him before he died. It's called the original Fayette County Welfare League case, and it goes into what is permissible and not, and essentially anything's permissible as long as it's not fighting words, which are those words that can be reasonably taken to generate a physical combat in the ordinary, between ordinary and reasonable people. So it's kind of like yelling fire, falsely yelling fire in a crowded theater. It's likely to produce public disorder, which may produce injury or upset. So you can't incite disorder. And that's one of the things that's in question, and it's still not yet decided 230 some years on in the history of this republic. So you can't do stuff that's likely to incite disorder or intended to incite disorder. If you say something that is simply your opinion about something, including your opinion about the character of somebody that may be substantiated, that's okay, because under American law, truth is an absolute defense to a defamation action. In general,
Absolutely.
people don't file them because you open yourself up to all sorts of inquiry about your character.
And I want to snatch the baton back really quickly. I'm glad you said that. You read my mind all the time we do these shows. Real quickly, David Burke says they used to say some things are better left unsaid. So, that being said, one of the attorneys, Edward Palcic, is a defamation attorney and he's worked with President Trump in the past. He was also the defamation attorney in the case involving the late influencer Ashley Janae and her fiance Joe McCann. They have stated that there are people that are making statements against the friends, if you will, of Nolan Wells. And according to research and statements, cease and desist letters may be sent out or have been sent out to social media commentators, influencers for statements that they've made. So again, can you explain a little bit, I guess, in more of a
What that's
layman's
about.
term,
Yeah,
not
I can see some of
about
these.
the opinions and defamation versus opinions, because a lot of people have opinions,
Yeah,
but
well, the problem is a lot of what I've heard on social media and to an extent mainstream media is getting very, very close to that keen edge to the other side of defamation. And some of it should not be said because it exposes the person who either published it or said it to a defamation action. Now, interestingly enough, the deciding factors are often, is this person got enough money to be worth a lawsuit, or are they too broke busted to get past being judgment proof, which means you get a Pyrrhic victory. You say, okay, I won, but it cost me a whole lot of money and cost and expense to get this verdict of liability, but the person's too broke busted to collect anything from them. They're judgment proof.
what about injunctions as it relates to
Well, that
prejudice?
too, cease and desist. Cease and desist letter is one thing. Sometimes it is crap. You can ignore them at your peril. Sometimes you prevail. Sometimes they prevail. Um, it's your business. There's no First Amendment sanction that would keep you from saying a lot of stuff that might be defamatory. You just might have to have civil consequences you attend to. But it happens all the time. And there is this practice amongst some of the more unscrupulous part of the bar, meaning the lawyers, of carefully calculating how much it would cost to prosecute a defamation action or falsely filing a claim of abuse, some wrongdoing against someone, and then calculating how much it would cost to defend against it or push it, and then reaching a settlement that is just a little below that. So even if the person who is offended won, they would be out of more money than if they settled without admitting liability, just a settlement. So that's a practice amongst unscrupulous lawyers, and it's beginning to build up. One of our main problems is that we have too many lawyers and they have too few clientels to charge reasonable fees and keep their business going. So they charge outrageous fees that do not require an amount of work and effort commensurate with the fee being charged. So there is that.
Absolutely, and I'm glad that you said that because Edward Poutsick, as I mentioned, is a defamation lawyer, and even though he's been in a lot of trials, a lot of them have been billion-dollar settlements. So
No,
I'm
there
glad
aren't
that you
billion
did that.
dollar settlements.
Well, they break them up, but no,
The biggest lawsuit verdict, jury verdict in American history was won by a black lawyer back in the 1980s. His name is Willie Gary. He practiced in Boca Raton, Florida. It was $980 million, and that stood up on appeal. It would probably be worth about a billion and a half, going on 2 billion now. The
wow.
previous largest was the Exxon Valdez verdict out of what happened with a tanker in distress off the Alaskan coast, but that was overturned on appeal. So Willie Gary holds the record for the largest jury verdict. He also holds the record for several of the top 10 largest settlements in American history. So that is another thing, the popular rumor and myth that does not match up with the reality. People have ideas about what's going on that are not matching the reality of the situation.
Well, thank you for that. And I will definitely do my research, but I do
By
know
the way, his
that
firm is still in business. His
is it.
son, who's in his 50s right now, is, I believe, the senior active partner.
Okay, so you said this was in Boca Raton, Florida, correct?
The Gary firm, Gary, Willie Gary.
Willie Gary. Well, thank you for that. But no, I do know that the one I'm speaking about, Edward Pausick, who was shown with the Friends, um, he is among other things, defamation lawyer. There was a comment, and I don't know if you want to respond to it or not. And it says, how can you always, and I don't know if this is directed to you or in general, be on the side against Black people? Nothing about the things being said about Nolan's family.
Okay, unless you're a goddamn fool who's been stuck in some little back alley or stuck in front of your television set watching sports, you ought to know what's going on here. See, as I said, it's a two-edged sword. Black people for a long time have been complaining about the law being applied unequally. It's blind. You don't see what's in front of you. So now black folk want everybody to say, oh, we have to back up this narrative somehow or another. We are dumped on worse than anybody else. So you want to bend the law to protect us. Well, guess what? If you can bend to protect, you can bend to oppress. It just depends upon who's in charge at any given time. So if you want the law to be neutral, then you want it to be applied neutrally. That way you protect yourself. And if you're too big a fool to understand that, buck up and man up. Now, that's what you need to do. Quit being scared. You get nothing if you're too fearful to stand up to something. And then be careful what you stand up for because you may be assisting in your own demise.
Okay, so pivoting on or actually extending on to that comment as it relates to defamation and threats, there are some people who believe or have said that they believe that the parents of Nolan Wells, the late Nolan Wells, is seeking money, or this is all a money grab. And then there have been reports that Nolan Wells' mother, Miss Christine, received poor ratings at her job from anonymous people. Does she have legal recourse? Because
She
these
might have a
people,
defamation action. I don't know. I don't care right now. It's too penny ante for me to be paying attention to. In the scheme of things over the last half century, this is what makes me so angry. It is a minor matter that happens all of the time. And nobody cares about it until you get the collection of pimps who try to blow it all out of proportion for their own selfish purposes. That's where the real problem comes in. The people that are pushing it are elected officials who have delivered nothing to their constituents. So they're trying to manufacture something that gives their constituents a reason to continue to vote for them. They are in the law business of handling such matters generally by settlement. I haven't seen a trial from anybody yet. And that makes them a large income. And you have other people who have social media accounts that are monetized. You have other people who are with mainstream media whose corporate income or the corporation they're part of, that income is determined by Nielsen ratings. In other words, how many people are watching something on a given day or at a given time. So they have reason to ramp this up because it generates interest. Now, we need to separate that from the reality. I'm sure that if you looked at what happened on this 4th of July, and even if you accepted the premise that some are trying to push, there are worse examples of racism, homicide, wrongdoing that occurred on this last July 4th than what you're dealing with the Nolan situation. It's unfortunate. It's a tragedy. And what happens with the family is understood to be horrible because they lost a loved one getting ready to get into the first part of adulthood. And it is very, very unsettling when something like that happens to somebody in your family or somebody you know. And remember this too, if these kids are friends like that, it hurt them losing their friend too. I've lost quite a few. And see, unlike this generation, a whole bunch of folk I graduated from high school, went to college with, we're 18, 19 years old. Guess what? They didn't take a full load one semester and they got one of those notices. You're now 1A after going for your draft board physical exam, and they didn't make it back from the nom. So we lost a whole lot of people in this age. So we got used to it, I suppose. Families lost loved ones with no answer except they went over and didn't come back and presumed missing. So, you can handle it. Pass the mic. You got the baton again. Go
oh,
run.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Understood. Understood. So there was another, I don't see it there. Someone had put a comment. I don't know what happened to it.
Well,
And
answer to a lot of them that I've seen, stop being so scary. Buck up, brave up. You have the means to self defense. There's a thing called the manly art of self defense. A whole lot of young brothers need to brush up on that so they learn how to fight. Fist fight. You don't have to go kill somebody, punch it out. People understand that that's part of human nature. It used to be you weren't much of a man if you hadn't been in a bunch of fist fights by the time you got to your early adulthood. You got the baton. Hello?
okay, do you see the comment from Gear in No Excuses says, these people have no right to question the mindset nor path of justice a parent of a passed on teen takes. They have so much to say, while every single possible witness to this says nothing. And
Well,
T. Ruby is next. Put that on the
okay. Well, the
screen.
point on that one is
Okay,
quick answer. How are you going to compel somebody to say anything when there is the Fifth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and the 14th Amendment that applies it to the states? You have a right to remain silent. Nobody can make you say anything.
but my question is, and thank you so much, Gear in No Excuses. The fact that they've already willingly, I would assume, have spoken to Brandon Tatum 2 or 3 times now. Have they given, well, no, they haven't given up their right, but if this goes any further, say something does happen down the line, and as you mentioned, we really need to wait until everything comes in and prayerfully everything is accurate and transparent and no issues with it. Speaking so early from someone who is not an attorney, Brandon Tatum is not an attorney. As you mentioned earlier, you feel as though they should not have said anything. Could these communications, if you will, certainly come back to hurt them or impeach them if they do become witnesses?
Okay, well, let's put it this way. Somebody did the same thing who's now on trial in Nevada for the murder of Tupac. So you see what happens, and there can be a lapse of years. So you have to be careful what you say. And by the way, a lot of crimes never are solved. May I bring one of the more notorious ones to light?
Absolutely. I was about to ask you that. Go ahead.
St. Valentine's Day, Chicago. It's been subject to quite a few movies. There was something known as the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. The Some members of a rival gang were in a garage, and some uniformed people came in masquerading as police with Thompson submachine guns, and they gunned them down. It's known as the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. It is assumed widely that Al Capone ordered that hit, but Al Capone wasn't convicted of that offense. He wasn't charged with it. And so far, that crime, one of the most notorious in American history, is still officially unsolved. How about that one?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll follow up with that when we conclude. T. Riggles. Thank you, T. Riggles. Questions. Judge, are there things that seem peculiar in this Nolan Wells case to you?
No, they're not. As I said, it's common. People drown all the time. I pull bodies out of the water who have drowned. Now, it's tragic, but we don't breathe water. So when you get in the water, there are cramps that occur. There's a new phenomenon that's being noticed. It was at one point mistaken for drowning. That's just change in pressure causes bilateral pulmonary edema, and people drowned on their own juices very quickly, just 15 feet underwater. So that's happening. It's spreading in Hawaii. They're beginning to notice that's the cause of what look to be snorkeling accidents. You have people who get swept out in currents, and this is in the Atlantic Ocean, and there are some notorious currents that occasionally and suddenly spring up in the area. So all sort of things can happen here. Intoxication can reduce abilities to respond to emergency situations. Not saying anybody was intoxicated, but you know, the B thing, beach, beer, booze, babes, bikinis, boy, things happen.
Okay.
And I'm not saying that's the case here, but it's possible. I mean, it's just the ordinary mix. So I don't see anything that is happening here that doesn't happen many times every year.
Okay. JB or IQ says drinking alcohol and going swimming is a no-no. It causes the muscles to cramp up and you drown. That was a
Yeah,
comment.
it happens.
And T. Rickles has a question. I'll place it on the stage again. Thank you, T. Rickles. How sure, and this is to you, how sure are you that Nolan drowned percentage wise?
I don't care. It's just to me ordinary business. It's like asking a mortician, what do you think about somebody having a heart attack? Well, that's business. It's like telling a homicide detective, what do you think about? Well, that's business. You take a criminal defense lawyer, like I was at one time, yeah, that's business, but it's ordinary. You take somebody who's presided over a whole bunch of homicide trials in the murder capital of the U.S., that's just business. It's ordinary and regular. In other words, you care because it happens and there are people involved, but it's like you're a traffic cop. How many fatal accidents do you encounter over a 25, 30-year long career that occur because somebody didn't pay attention and hit a pedestrian, hit a light pole, was drinking and driving, or somebody that was going 75 in a 75 uh, mile an hour speed zone and had a flat tire, something blew into the windshield, got momentarily distracted because the cell phone rang or wanted to reach over and turn the radio to another station. Yeah, it happens. It's ordinary business. It goes with the territory. So that's like asking somebody that was in the infantry in the Nam, Korea, World War II, World War One, in the Sand Pile for Gulf War One or Two, or Afghanistan, what they think about somebody getting done in. Yeah, it's horrible. You lose a buddy, you lose a team member, but it happens. It goes with the game. So, yeah, get ready for it. People die all the time. And everybody, there's one thing about it, ain't nobody getting out of this alive. So, yeah, it's reality.
Okay, my last question, and I thank you all so much, and for all of those that have attended. What is, for those that may not understand, because a lot of people think when they hear the word grand jury that someone has been charged, there's been an indictment. What exactly is the grand jury? And can you break down the elements as it relates to the grand jury? What they are for, especially in the state of Mississippi, because we are speaking about Nolan Wells, and what the job is for the judge and the grand jury, and then we'll close it out. Thank you all so
O-
much for that questions and comments, and again, thank you to my guest, my friend, the Honorable Judge Joe Brown. And I'll yield back.
Okay. Here is a copy of the U.S. Constitution. It also covers the principles behind it and the amendments. But the principal part of this that deals with the Constitution itself is 14 pages. The typical rule book that you're supposed to go over and read so you can get your driver's license is about 10 times as long when it comes to motor vehicle operation. Read and learn the rules of the road for where you live so you won't be so confused. Now, grand jury goes back to Robin Hood almost 1,000 years ago. And the purpose of the grand jury was to protect the ordinary subject of the crown from excesses by the king. Typically, a grand jury is 24 people, but in a petit jury is 12 people. A petit jury will hear a criminal case in most states, and the verdict always has to be unanimous, and 12 people have to find beyond a reasonable doubt that a crime was committed. And that means even if they believe that the crime was committed, if there's any other reasonable possibility, but that they have to acquit. Now, probable cause is just more likely than not something wrong happened and there is reasonable grounds for having somebody answer to a charge where they are presumed innocent and the indictment is in law presumed to have been a mistake. So, what happens in this area of the country is instead of impaneling 24 people as a grand jury, the trend is to just put 12 in and also make them unanimous in determining that there's probable cause. So an indictment, a true bill of indictment, comes down. They can also, in this area, Mississippi and Tennessee, engage in their own independent investigation, they being the grand jury, and they can, on their own, without intervention of the district attorney's office, return what they call a presentment where the grand jury has called its own witnesses, interrogated them without the district attorney being present, and saying, we find there's probable cause that a crime was committed. Now, you're wondering when that could come into operation. Well, just hypothesize that they're looking at the attorney general and they don't want the attorney general down there participating in something that may be directed against him or her. So, yeah, when a probable cause finding and a true bill of indictment or a presentment is returned, then that person must answer the charges. And the state then has the burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that the person committed the crime charged or one of the lesser included crimes that is embraced by the bigger crime. Like you charge somebody with first degree murder, that also deals with, in a lot of states, what's known as second degree murder, voluntary manslaughter, perhaps involuntary manslaughter. Then in a lot of states, you would get into reckless homicide or criminally negligent homicide, and then it goes from there. You also have an element known as jury nullification. It has happened. I've been the judge presiding when the jury comes back with a question, and in the several instances I got it, it read exactly the same. Your Honor, if we think the victim deserved killing, do we have to convict the defendant? Or there was one I was a defense lawyer on. It's kind of funny in retrospect. It was back 1980, 79, 81. I had a series of defendants who were charged with a crime that carried 3 to 15 years in the Tennessee state penitentiary system. And what the crime was is if a husband and a wife decided to get frisky and go down on each other, that was known as unnatural sex acts, and it carried 3 to 15 years. So you could pretty much count on jury nullification because since most of the jury pool had engaged in such acts, they weren't going to give somebody 3 years in the penitentiary for having a good time going down on their significant other. So, anyway, it ranges. So, you have to take this into consideration if you're the DA, that's the district attorney, and decide whether or not there is a utility in bringing a prosecution. Now, under American law and before that English law, the prosecutor had absolute authority and discretion on whether or not to charge somebody or not charge somebody. It's known as prosecutorial discretion, and it is supposed to promote justice. So, there you go. Maybe that answers your question. Probably it won't. And the reason it's not supposed to totally is because it depends on the circumstances. So the answer is it depends.
Understood. And the last comment that we have or question is from Welcome Laugh. It says, what role does life ending text messages play in convicting someone of unaliving?
Of what? Let
What?
me
Okay,
let me try and read it. Hold on.
absolutely. I'll yield back.
Life-ending text messages. I'm not sure I understand what they're saying, but in other words, I guess somebody threatening to kill someone. Well, if someone says that and someone winds up dying, that under circumstances that depend on foundation, how this came to be discovered and whether it's admissible, might establish a motive, it might establish intent, it might be relevant, and it depends.
Okay, well, that's it. All I have. Um, Thank you again for those that have joined, the moderators, subscribers, those that participated, and left your comments and your feelings. Again, this is a very sensitive and passionate story for many. Again, there are many people that feel as though a lot of attention is given to this. But to be fair, just as I mentioned earlier, for those of you that are just coming in, when the case of, and even though she, I believe, is still with us, but I don't believe she's been found yet, Nancy Guthrie, we had a flurry of social media influencers that actually went, I'm not going to mention their names, to the location, speaking to law enforcement. Again, I don't want to call them pimps and again, people have their right of opinion, but people do it. There are a lot of people who do it, no matter what their race, ethnicity, gender, they do it. So I just wanted to make that clear to everyone that is listening.
If I
And
could make one quick, this last remark real quick on this.
absolutely,
You'd be better off paying attention to what's going on at your gas station, convenience store, nightclub, movie house, on the streets, and refusing to let attention being distracted from the ineptitude being demonstrated by our elected officials and being able to handle such things and bringing such things under control. This is a tragedy, and I'm sure a lot of people have let their feelings get involved in it. But the problem is that law doesn't really work when it's about feelings rather than cold, rational logic, reason, and application of the law based on experience and knowledge of the law and wisdom in the ways of the world.
understood. And this is the very last one. Again, T, thank you so much. T wants to know, and I'm sure you're going to say we'll have to wait. But the question is, how can we prove Nolan drowned without looking at Nolan's lungs.
Without look, they did. See, there's an autopsy that is performed on the state level that's required, and you take this very perishable tissue out of the body. They don't stuff it back in so somebody somewhere else can conduct a private autopsy. And the other thing you might want to look at to give context to the whole thing, this occurred in Mississippi. If there's any civil liability, it comes out of Mississippi and will be determined in Mississippi. If there's any criminal liability, it'll come out of Mississippi and be determined in Mississippi. If there's any federal liability, it will be decided in Mississippi. But there was a big press conference, and you got the usual suspects assembled in Chicago. So, what does Chicago have to do with what is exclusively to be determined in Mississippi? Understood there's a national interest in it, but don't get hustled. Just be patient, and what will be, will be. Maybe nothing will come of it. And even if you have suspicions, okay, who did your local killing that's most recent and who's been brought to justice? We just had some 7 folk got shot this last weekend here in Memphis
Oh my God.
in one location. So, I mean, it turns out apparently the mayor has an interest in one of the deceased, so the police got ordered to put all resources in this, and now they have 2 suspects in custody. But there are a whole lot of other unsolved problems. I'm looking at a refrigerator in my kitchen right now that has been moved out from the wall, and it was supposed to be repaired by a guy that is a pretty competent handyman. But he didn't because his son got shot to death not long ago. So this is a direct connection. Somebody I work closely with, he's lost 2 sons in the last 6 years, both of them 40 some years old and gainfully employed, crime free, and some idiots in the perpetration of other crimes wound up killing them. So that's an impact. Uh, Somebody else who is a remote family affiliate of mine got killed not long ago. So people die all the time. So I'm supposed to be less concerned about their circumstances than I am with what on close examination seems to be a tragic accident. And I don't even know the people. You see, that's the kind of thing that you have to be careful of when people with the responsibility of delivering public peace, dignity, and order cannot, and their intent is to deflect attention from this failure to something else that ramps up the emotions. We've got another one up here. What's this? No, the government wants to face. There are a whole lot of reasons. First off, you don't want to badmouth the innocent. Second off, it may be confidential because if you publish it, some other people might die. Next thing, there might be matters of national security involved, and your curiosity is not the most important thing. It's justice, and justice has to be impartial. And one of the reasons you tamp this down is so you don't taint jury pools, and no one can get a fair trial of the matter.
And I'm glad you mentioned that. Sorry, real quickly. Again, back to Brandon Tatum having these young men on his panel or speaking to them or interviewing them, however you want to use. Could that, in your opinion, if there is a jury or others involved, could that have already tainted?
It may have. I mean, these see so many people are ignorant of how their system works. In particular, they've never set up and tried to go through 75, then 150 people, and all of these folk get excluded for cause because they've already made up their opinion or minds on what the case is about based on what they've heard through the media. So I will say this: very seldom does what you hear in the media match up with what the jury is going to get to hear when there's real live evidence and somebody has to swear or affirm or take oath and deliver a more real version. So it's interesting. Uh, I've had many instances of the court room filled with the press because it was viewed as such a horror. And in at least one of these instances where the press was all saying the same thing they are now, the jury came back and said, "We think the guy should have been killed. So do we have to convict the defendant?" You know, you get that happening.
Wow. One last question, I promise you. That's one last question. It's the last one, T, because we have to give the judge back the remainder of his Sunday. And the question is, since the sheriff in Mississippi said there's no foul play, should we not investigate the Nolan Wells case? And the question is, I agree with Mr. Brown about the young men being interviewed. Did these young men incriminate themselves?
No, they didn't incriminate themselves. Actually, they stated a pretty common situation. Hey, we've got integrated schools. Remember Brown v. Board of Education, 1954, that said separate but equal is inherently unequal. We have had integrated schools for 70 some years. So we've had generations of kids who've grown up around other races and ethnicities and been close to them as they went through school. So we've got many situations where we've got white kids who are good friends with black kids. We've got black kids who are good friends with Asian kids. You see it in the movies. That's a reality. You see it on the streets. You see it in colleges. You see it in the business place. So it's inevitable that there'll be interaction. So, it's going to happen, and there are cases where there might be one white guy hanging around with black guys, a couple of Hispanic guys thrown in the mix. You might have situations where it's one black guy with a bunch of white guys he knows. So just because they've been together from 5 years old to 18, 19 years old, why all of a sudden does somebody want somebody dead? See, it just doesn't make good sense, but it's not saying that it could not happen. So let's let things run their course instead of coming up with this drivel of, black guy doesn't need to hang around with any white kids because he'll get murdered. Like, yeah, well, don't you think it would have happened in 12, 13, 14 years?
Understood. Well, that is all that I have for you. And I'm not going to be making any other videos unless something as far as evidence or anything major that comes out. I think most of the content creators on here, they're doing a very good, thorough job with reporting on that. I wanted to get your perspective, and we haven't chatted in a while, so it was good to see you virtually and to get your perspective. And those that had their comments and perspectives, again, respect to them as well. So thank you, Judge Joe Brown, again, for taking time out to speak with me and to speak with the chat as well. And I guess we'll wait and see. You mentioned earlier about the St. Valentine's massacre. I hope and pray this is not going to be another.
Well, it's most likely it's an accident. There may be negligence involved. There may be recklessness involved. But in terms of a first degree murder plan, plotted out homicide, what's the motive? Um, what's the intent that would generate a criminal homicide? It may be, but I mean, on first examination, there's nothing that suggests itself other than somebody's emotions, which wouldn't be there if more of the public would man up and understand what that meant. Man up. And when you do, it doesn't look so bad.
Absolutely. And for those of you that are just coming in and may think that Judge Joe Brown has ignored what you said, he has said several times. And for those of you, you can catch the replay. He said, on the face, it doesn't look like it. It looks like an accident, but it might be something else. So keep in mind, he has said that several times. Again,
Don't jump to conclusions based on your fear. Overcome your fear and be brave and show personal courage and fortitude. And you stop thinking like a little twit who looks into every shadow and sees a threat. Yea, though I walk through the valley in the shadow of death, I fear no evil, not just because Lord's on your side, but because you're the baddest MF in the valley. Try
and
that approach.
and and Mark 1 verse 15, the time has come, he said, the kingdom of God has come near. Repent and believe the good news. Can I get
Okay,
it?
you can go that way too.
Can I get
However, I'll
it?
back it up a few steps. Just stop
Okay.
being so 6-year old scared of the dark, and looking for a boogeyman, evil, something out there. The Baba Yaga ain't real, but patience. Just see what happens and don't let people hustle you. This is a con game, whether or not the underlying premise is true. This is a con game that some people are running on you on the national level. They want you to support them and they want you to be scared and they want to ramp up and say, I'm on your side. And they're trying to also hustle up business and all sorts of other things, hustle up votes. So quit getting work, back off and see, wait and find out what's there. And if there's something that's there, likely as not, with the intense attention that is being directed to this case, something will come out. And also be insulted that this one little incident is getting more attention than all of the thousands of real homicides that are being ignored.
Okay. Any other final comments before we close this out? Again, everyone, please thank the Honorable Judge Joe Brown. And again, for those of you who don't know, that is how I always address him, and I have for the last several years, out of respect.
Can
Um,
I say something about that too?
yeah,
Stop trying to down every black person you see and bring them onto your level. You worship somebody like LeBron or Kobe, but you don't respect the people who have actually achieved something who are just like you otherwise. White people always give respect to the titles that somebody has acquired. But you see this thing with the first name, everybody 17-year olds call 80-year-old people by their first names and don't know them. That's to generate a lack of respect for accomplishment. Now, you can call me what you want to, all kinds of negative stuff, but bottom line is that you one day might do some of what I did or more than what I did. And if you do, you deserve some respect. And the primary thing is you deserve respect if you act like a man or a woman and you're not a coward and you stand up for what's right and you don't go along to get along. You do what you need to do. Now, that said, you won't be so anxious to go seek Baba Yaga and see something hiding under your bed. All right?
Okay, hopefully no mice will pop out either.
Hey, Mickey and Minnie, Mortimer, and
No,
all the buds.
I've gone up against some heavy hitters, but mice, no, they beat me up. Can't fight them. Well, again, thank you so much, and we'll talk soon. You enjoy the remainder of your Sunday. It's raining here. I don't know what it is out there in Memphis, but it's raining here again, here in DC. So, yeah.
104 degrees yesterday, bright and sunny.
Well, enjoy some sun. Enjoy some sun.
That's too hot.
Well, enjoy the cool air then.
There it is.
All right. Oh, Katie wanted to say hello to you real quick. Thank you, Katie.
Hi.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much again for tuning in. Honorable Judge Joe Brown will speak again soon. And again, thank you so
All
much.
right, dear. Have a good day yourself.
You too. Be blessed. Bye bye.
Okay. Sign off. I want to say something to you when you sign off.
Okay.
Okay.
Everyone. Okay. Everyone, thank you so much. Say goodbye to the Honorable Judge Joe Brown. And I'll see you sooner than later, God willing. Bye bye.